Smackdown vs. Raw 2007. You all thought I forgot about this, didn't you? The reason why it took me so long to cover this was because I didn't want to emulate the game and I wanted to capture footage directly from my old original Xbox 360. I then decided I wanted to hook up all my old consoles for easy recording, which turned into a massive project in itself. But it's all done now, and I can now play my original copy of Smackdown vs. Raw 2007 on my TV and not hooked up to a PC, and I can record the footage using an external capture card straight to an SSD. It's just way more comfortable doing it this way instead of dragging consoles into my little workspace for the sake of recording one or two games. Anyway, I've got good memories of this game. I bought it on release day for the 360 and I was super excited to see what a WWE game would look like on a 7th generation video game console. A PlayStation 3 version was planned too, but it got cancelled, but the game did release on PS2 and PSP also. Going back to Smackdown vs. Raw 2007 nowadays was, yeah, it was a bit of an experience and it wasn't all good, but I'll explain what worked and what didn't work in today's video. Smackdown vs. Raw 2007 was released in November 2006, but details of the game were being shared by publisher THQ as early as March. The 360 and PlayStation 3 versions were announced early by THQ President Kelly Flock, and Jack's Pacific Vice President Nello Lucic spoke about a new interactive fighting area within the crowd along with a brand new updated grapple system. Around 2 weeks after these announcements, THQ put out that trailer. The trailer featuring John Cena and Kurt Angle fighting outside the ring and in the audience. And this footage right here gained a lot of attention when it was shown at E3. I remember seeing this and being completely blown away, but hold your horses there, cowboy, because the game would look nothing like this. This wasn't in-game footage. It seems that IGN got duped by the video too, seeing as they wrote an article about how great it all looks. They talked about the facial expressions being great. They talked about the use of fluorescent light bulbs, which by the way was initially included in the game but was later removed. Tubes can be found in a prototype version that's currently available online. The Angle vs Cena video looked incredible, but it was merely a demonstration of the new area you could fight in within the crowd. But it is kinda funny reading that IGN article back. They got suckered in just like everyone else. In July, it was then announced that the PlayStation 3 version of Smackdown vs. Raw 2007 had to get cancelled due to the game taking longer to finish than its Xbox counterpart. Creative manager Corey Ledesma did put PlayStation fans at ease a little when he said the only difference between the PS2 and the Xbox 360 versions would be graphical. The content included in both releases would be identical, with the Xbox version just looking a bit prettier. In here, have a look for yourself. Here's footage of the 360 version and the PS2 version running head to head. The PS2 version does look good, but the Xbox release blows it out of the water. I'll talk more about the way Smackdown vs. Raw 2007 actually looks in just a moment, but I imagine PS2 owners may have been a bit envious of the 360 version. Corey wasn't 100% truthful though, because the PS2 version would only allow crowd fighting during certain match types. In the 360 release you could go into the audience at any time you wanted, but let me clear something up too. Fighting in this little section of the arena isn't really all that special. Yes, at the time it was something new, and anything new in these games back then was always something to get excited about. But the way THQ talked about it, you'd think this was a real game-changing feature when all it was really was another little section of the arena where you could fight. Before I talk about the controls and piss more people off, I want to talk about how good Smackdown vs. Raw 2007 looked as a video game. It still looks really great today, and I was actually surprised when I played this game for the first time in over, what is it now, 17 years or so? The 360 had only been out for a year when this game got released, and for a game that's so early in the console's life cycle, it looks incredibly good, especially during entrances, post-match celebrations, and cutscenes. Loads of these early 360 games utilised bloom effects, with some games using it much better than others. Rumble Rose's Double X would be an example of a developer going way overboard with bloom effects to the point it makes the game look way too bright and overexposed, but Yuke's did a great job of using the effect to really enhance the overall presentation. There's a very subtle blur around character outlines that works really well. The depth of field isn't overdone either, which really helps the arenas seem bigger than what they really are, bar, something that Rumble Roses XX tried to do too, but it just created a kinda blurry mess. And the superstars themselves all look great considering this is a game developed in 2006. Now, to be fair, some wrestler faces do look off a bit. Mickie James, for example, looks like the generic female creator wrestler face, and you really wouldn't know this was Mickie unless you were told beforehand. Dusty Rhodes is another example off the top of my head that didn't look quite right. But generally speaking, the other superstars in the game look good, and the difference between Smackdown vs Raw 2006 is like night and day. Even comparing the PS2 version shows a big upgrade. It can't be overstated just how great this game looked when it first came out, and there's an argument to be made about Smackdown vs Raw 2007 looking even better than the 2008 edition, but I'll cover that in the future. The game looks fantastic, let's move on. We have a brand new grapple system in Smackdown vs Raw 2007, and this is going to be my main gripe about the game. It wasn't an issue back then, but when you go back to play this game nowadays, what with the button layout and grapple system having evolved so much over the years, Smackdown vs Raw 2007 does feel a bit tedious when it comes to actually playing matches. Please let me explain, and take off your rose-tinted glasses for just a moment. Trust me, I had mine on too when I started playing this game. The video tutorials at the start of the game explain the new grapple system quite well. Basically, you're going to flick the right analog stick to perform quick grapples, while holding the right bumper while flicking the stick lets you perform strong grapples. Having a button modifier like this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It worked really well in Def Jam Fight for New York, but it just doesn't feel right in Smackdown vs Raw 2007 when you're actually playing the game. It's like you have to take half a second to remember to hold in that right bumper. For Irish whips and hammer throws, you also have to hold in RB, which just feels inconvenient for something so basic. And that's where I think my main issue lies within this game. They tried to get all fancy by using the right stick for grapples in an effort to steer away from the more arcade-like controls of previous games, but it makes the game a bit more tedious, in my opinion. The grapple system just isn't good. There's other issues too. When playing against the CPU, they tend to reverse quite a lot of your moves. By using the default settings, it's hard to string together 3 moves without the third move getting countered, and you can pretty much predict when one of your moves are going to get reversed. You can change the counter and reversal frequency within the game options, and you can also change the button layout for grapples, but I tend to play these games on the default settings because this is the way the developer intended the game to be played. So yeah, just to be clear, these issues are fixable within the options. Another new grapple system was added where you can click the right analog stick in order to lift your opponent up before using the stick again to slam, throw, or perform a suplex. These moves greatly deplete your stamina meter, so you gotta be careful when using them. Again, the stamina system can be turned off, but the more changes you make in options, the further away you're getting from the core gameplay of Smackdown vs Raw 2007. Environmental hotspots are also new, and these I actually like. You can drag your opponent to different sections of the ring, ringside area, and backstage area to perform moves only available when in certain spots. So for example, the corner is a hotspot which allows you to throw multiple punches, and the ring apron's another hotspot. Again, using these little areas will greatly deplete your stamina meter, and the bigger wrestlers in the game have way less stamina than the smaller guys. You can't overdo it or you're going to leave yourself wide open. With these new mechanics in the game, there's also an effort here to make the characters feel heavier. Smackdown vs Raw 2007 plays slower than previous games because Ukes wanted to make the game more lifelike. Your character won't zip around the ring anymore. It takes a lot more time for your character to turn around when trying to face an opponent. Button mashing's only used when in submission holds, kicking out of covers, or getting yourself to your feet after being laid out. So, from the new grapple system, the right bumper being used for heavy attacks, the CPU reversing moves a lot more often, the hotspots around the arena, and the stamina system playing a bigger role, Smackdown vs Raw 2007 wants you to play matches a bit more methodically than previous entries. It's not bad that they wanted to change direction and make things a bit more realistic, but Smackdown vs Raw 2007 is kinda stuck between realism and the arcade style of play from previous games. Like, the balance isn't totally there yet, with animations being carried over from older releases and whatnot. Don't get me wrong either, it is still fun to play. I assume the drastic changes in the control scheme and grapple system was simply due to the WWE debuting on new hardware and the developers wanting to try something new. It is understandable. Just one more thing before I move on to more positive stuff. The AI in this game can be, at times, absolutely atrocious, especially when using the new area within the crowd. The CPU gets confused quite easily and it'll try to do the same thing over and over again. Speaking of trying the same thing again and again, the CPU will do nothing but Irish whip you when playing an elimination chamber match, sometimes finding itself in a loop that it can't break itself out of. We have no new match types this year, but we can play Money in the Bank ladder matches. Table matches now require you to perform a finisher through the table while also making sure your opponent sustained enough damage. We've got Hell in a Cell making its return, cage matches, buried alive matches, all that stuff. Tweaks have been made here and there when it comes to gimmick matches, but there's nothing major. The Fulfill Your Fantasy match has been removed, meaning the game doesn't have a match type specifically for women, but who really played that mode anyway? I still think there's good variety here and more than enough to keep you busy. The roster isn't bad either, with 16 superstars making their WWE game debut, including Psychosis, Ken Kennedy, Bobby Lashley, and Johnny Nitro. All in all, there's 67 characters to choose from, including the unlockable legends, so it's not a bad selection at all. If this isn't enough, you can always go into creation mode where you can create a new superstar to add to your roster, but for some reason, custom soundtracks weren't included in the game. The option to add your own music for your created wrestler's entrance wouldn't be available until next year's release. You can also create a moveset as usual, you can create your own championship belts, there's an option to make your own stables, and you can book your own pay-per-view events, which I never saw the point of, if I'm honest. Seriously, I'm not sure why people would use this option except for folks who maybe run e-feds or something, I don't know. Online play was also a pretty big deal for this game, but the servers have been long shut down. I definitely spent the most time in this game playing others on Xbox Live, but I also remember it not being super stable. To be fair, my internet connection may not have been great either back then, so your mileage may have varied quite a bit. Still, this is the first WWE game I ever played online, and it's probably the wrestling game I played online the most, along with WWE All-Stars. Okay, I'm going to play a few months of story mode as usual and talk about the single player experience, but first there's another few things I need to talk about. GM mode returns in Smackdown vs Raw 2007 and it's good. Not a whole lot's changed, but there are a few additions. The biggest change would be the additional storylines you can add to your rivalries. You can now hire writers to come up with new stories and angles, which I thought was a nice touch. Reading up on this, it looks like folks are a bit torn between this GM mode and the previous one found in Smackdown vs Raw 2006, simply due to the roster, and some people thinking the storyline rivalries are a bit of a nuisance rather than something that actually enhances the mode. But honestly, I think it's fine. I did play GM mode in last year's game a bit more simply because it was so new and fresh at the time, but you can't go wrong here either. Honestly, I think the old GM mode found in previous games blow the new iterations out of the water. Every time I try to get stuck into GM mode in a 2K game, I end up either never coming back to it or the game crashes on me. I definitely recommend checking out GM mode in the Smackdown vs Raw games though if you haven't done so already. It's a great time waster and you do find yourself getting lost in it, especially when things are going well. We've also got a locker room in Smackdown vs Raw 2007 that ties in with story mode, but I'll explain what the locker room's all about. Basically, it's your central hub for checking out your in-game achievements, checking out character stats and character bios, unlocking new items in the WWE shop, and launching additional in-game challenges that will award you with extra money. These challenges are great, by the way. I really do like these little extras that extend the game a little, and from what I remember, some of the final challenges can be pretty difficult. If you want the challenge trophy for your trophy case, and if you want the Saturday night's main event arena, you'll need to complete all challenges. But you've got a whole year until Smackdown vs Raw 2008 comes out, so you've got plenty of time. The locker room can also be customized. You can change the wallpaper, change the decorations, you can add new items you've purchased in the shop. Everything here is strictly cosmetic, so make yourself at home and decorate the place whatever way you like. There's also a PC in the corner, one of those new super gaming PCs that no doubt cost a fortune, and the PC comes into play a bit more in story mode, which we're going to check out right now. So I played around 3 months of story mode for this video, and I do remember playing through some of these stories in the past. You're going to pick a superstar to begin your career with, and unfortunately not everyone's selectable here. Some superstars have been left out, which I guess is due to some of the guys being unavailable for voiceover work. Either way, it's a bit of a bummer. I selected Mr. Kennedy for this run, seeing as he's a new character, so that means I'm on Teddy Long's Smackdown brand, Playa. Each storyline lasts for 1 month. Storylines will differ depending on which brand you're on and which superstar you choose, but my first storyline centers around Chris Benoit and The Undertaker, the Rabid Wolverine and the Deadman. I check my super gaming PC that loads the WWE website super quickly, and I read a story all about the ongoing feud The Undertaker's currently in with Chris Benoit. This is pretty awesome, by the way. I like how storylines are expanded with these WWE.com articles, and even though it's just a wall of text, it does go a long way in setting the tone for what's currently going on. Simple yet effective. Anyway, Teddy Long wants me to officiate a match between Taker and Benoit because Ken Kennedy's a super trustworthy guy. So it's off to SmackDown as Mr. Kennedy becomes a special guest referee. By the way, they did a brilliant job with Kennedy's entrance. His pre-match introduction's pretty spot on.
I hail from Green Bay, Wisconsin, Mr.
Like any sane human being, I find it absolutely impossible to be a special referee and not be a total dickhead. So both guys get a chair shot to the face and Chris Benoit gets counted out. I counted just a little fast, as you can see right here. I mean, it wasn't that bad. But Teddy Long got all pissed off and so did The Undertaker. I mean, I helped out the dead man, he should be thanking me. Taker gave an interview to WWE.com about how he didn't need my help and how I tainted The Undertaker's victory. So we have a match the next week on SmackDown, and even though The Undertaker hit Kennedy with a tombstone piledriver, old Kenny boy still won the match with a devastating Russian leg sweep. That'll teach him. In the backstage area, Undertaker tries to get revenge by being all spooky, but Chris Benoit appears to really scare the shit out of Kennedy, and it seems to work. Benoit wants another match against Taker without Kennedy getting involved, so the following week the boys cut an in-ring promo where Taker calls Chris a little man. Teddy Long comes out, he says Kennedy's now involved, so he books Benoit versus Kennedy just for shits and giggles, and I was way too busy playing on my phone during this match, and that no good son of a bitch Chris Benoit beat me with a sunset flip. So Teddy Long books a triple threat match. Whoever gets pinned or submitted is out of a planned singles match at No Mercy. Whoever wins can choose a match type against the guy who didn't get pinned or submitted. Before the triple threat match, Taker messes around with the lights again. He calls Kennedy a distraction in this whole thing. Benoit doesn't want an alliance though, and Taker's like, "Did I say I wanted an alliance, you dipshit?" So in the triple threat match, Kennedy makes Benoit submit, and that means I can choose which match I want to face the dead man in. I'm going one-on-one with the Undertaker player, and it's going to be a hardcore match. Turns out the dead man's a total pushover, and I beat him in around 2.5 minutes. So Ken Kennedy came out on top of this feud that he had no right being in the first place. For my efforts, I earned the No Mercy trophy, the No Mercy Arena, and I can buy a load of dirty, smutty loading screens featuring the WWE Divas. I no longer have to look at the Great Khali while my game's loading. So, not bad for my first month on the job, if I do say so myself. Again, I do like how the WWE website's used in story mode. The cutscenes all look good and the voice acting so far isn't terrible. I also like the idea of one storyline taking up a month on the calendar, but it does mean too that you'll have to play career mode a few times to unlock everything. This isn't a complaint though, this isn't bad. Oh yeah, Teddy Long promised me a title shot if I get one more win on TV and another win on pay-per-view, but he totally lied and I didn't get my opportunity. The next storyline I completed was all about a SmackDown vs Raw Survivor Series match. Teddy Long selected myself, Booker T and Batista to represent the blue brand, while John Cena, Triple H and Ric Flair represent Raw. Teddy even left me a lovely voicemail talking about how great I am.
It's your general manager talking at you, and I'm wishing you good luck tonight against John Cena. Now, I know you don't need it, but you got it anyway.
Cena's another pushover. He gets taken out with a Green Bay plunge and Kennedy wins the match. But then Triple H attacks Booker T in the backstage area. Apparently, Raw superstars had their own designated parking lot. Someone had to have led Triple H into the Smackdown parking lot, so we have a traitor amongst us folks, and Batista's looking very sus. The following week, Batista's seen having a little chat with Nature Boy Ric Flair, and Kennedy isn't amused. Batista says he and Flair were just catching up, but Kennedy thinks maybe Big Dirty Dave's helping his old Evolution buddies out, and maybe it was Dave who led Triple H into the parking lot. Batista tells Kennedy to shut his stupid mouth. Ken goes out for a match against Flair, and two things here. One, my controller started to randomly disconnect, and my controller battery pack, that's lasted ever since I bought my 360 all those years ago, finally died and it wouldn't charge up again. I was so disappointed. In two, I didn't look over the match rules and I had no idea that this was a submission match. So it took me about 9.5 minutes before I made Rick give up to a chicken wing. Remember to read the rules of the match, folks, or pause the game and look them up yourself. Something I also totally forgot you could do while playing a match. Booker T leaves a voicemail saying Batista must be the traitor, but this is such a red flag. I totally think it's Booker now, so I'm on Team Batista. Maybe it wasn't Booker though, maybe it was me, I don't know. No time to think though, because Teddy Long wants my opinion on who I think the traitor is, and unfortunately I can't pick myself. So I select Booker T, and Book leaves me another voicemail the following week calling me crazy. He wants to prove himself by standing in my corner during a match against Triple H, so I have the match against Hunter and I beat him while Booker watches on. Rather conveniently, Booker leaves the ring after the bell while Hunter attacks me with his sledgehammer. Batista runs down for the save, and it turns out Booker actually is the traitor when he attacks Big Dirty Dave. I knew it all along. The T in Booker T stands for traitor. Dave leaves a message thanking me for believing in him, and then I'm told to pick a replacement for Team Smackdown. Out of all these options, there's only one man who can represent the blue brand with pride, honour and dignity. So congratulations Boogeyman, you're headlining Survivor Series, kid. Boogeyman stands in my corner for a tag team match against Booker T and Triple H. It's a pretty fun match that Kennedy wins via submission, and just before the big Survivor Series match, Booker T gets interviewed by WWE.com. He says Shane McMahon, Raw's current GM, promised him a job on the Red brand if Team Raw wins at Survivor Series. Well, joke's on you pal, because the Boogeyman gets his big moment when he pins John Cena at the very end of the show. Boogie Mania running wild. Booker still tries to get his job on Raw, but Shane tells him to fuck off. So the lesson here is simple, guys. Don't turn your back on SmackDown. I'll cover another month of story mode before wrapping the video up. I am enjoying this mode in SmackDown vs Raw 2007, so yeah, if you enjoy single player games, you'll definitely like this. Next, we've got a story all about legends. Roddy Piper and Mick Foley are getting booked in a special exhibition match on SmackDown, and Vince McMahon's making a big deal out of it. He's given Foley and Piper the 5-star treatment, and he's bringing the whole roster out to watch the match. It says here the match is taking place in Long Island, New York, but when I begin the match on SmackDown, Michael Cole says we're in Montreal, Quebec. And this reminds me of another negative I have about this game. The commentary is really bad. Well, that's maybe unfair. It's very repetitive. You'll hear the same lines get repeated over and over again after playing just 3 or 4 matches, and commentators also call reversals even before the reversal animation plays out inside the ring. There's no excuse for this really. Other sports games during this era had excellent commentary. I was already tired of Michael Cole talking about emotional as well as physical pain the wrestlers deal with during matches, and Jim Ross saying, if wishes were fishes, the world would be an ocean by now. If you know, you know. Khali falls victim to the Kenton bomb. Mick Foley compliments my match before wrestling Piper. Bam Bam Bigelow interferes in the Mick Foley vs Roddy Piper match, and Mick gets pulmonized. According to WWE.com, the injury could be career-threatening, and so Mr. Kennedy steps up to teach Bigelow and Piper a lesson. I can either fight them both in a 2-on-1 match, or I can face Bigelow in an ODQ match. I mean, what kind of stupid question's that? Of course I'm going to pick the hardcore match. And look, I catch Bam Bam out with a sneaky pin, but before I win via pinfall, the Hot Rod gets in the ring, and Ken Kennedy gets screwed over. Mick Foley saves me from getting Pillmanized, so Vince McMahon goes through the trouble of getting me a tag team partner for next week's SmackDown match against Bigelow and the Hot Rod. He only went out and got Matt Hardy to team up with me for this big match, so thank you very much, McMahon. After the match, Piper screws over Bam Bam. He shoves him into Kennedy before running away, and Kennedy ends up smacking Bigelow with a chair. So finally, I get a one-on-one match against Piper the following week on Raw, and it's here when Mick Foley screws Kennedy over. He and Piper worked together all along because they were annoyed their exhibition match was put on SmackDown and not on a pay-per-view. Mick Foley's turned heel, ladies and gents, and I'm not having a nice day. Bigelow wants to form an alliance, and so the storyline ends with a tornado tag cage match where Bigelow escaped before I did, leaving me all alone with Piper and Foley while he headed backstage for a few beers. Thankfully, I was able to win the match pretty easily, but I didn't get any rewards here because the final match wasn't on pay-per-view. So yeah, I felt like I wasted my time a bit on this one. The next storyline was all about the Royal Rumble and how Kennedy screwed over Randy Orton to get a spot in the Rumble match. Randy would get some revenge on Kennedy down the road, but we all know how that turned out. To wrap it up, SmackDown vs. Raw 2007 looks gorgeous for the time it came out. It showcased what a wrestling game could look like on brand new hardware. Story mode is good, GM mode's good, the creation modes are fine as always, though I'm not really one who could tell you if it's a giant improvement because I didn't play in creation modes all that much. But I gotta be honest too, I'm not a fan of the new grapple system, which feels more awkward than intuitive. Again, don't get me wrong, you will get used to it after a few matches and it isn't really a deal breaker. But the new grapple system, coupled with the rather cheap repetitive AI and the hotspot features being a total drain on character stamina, yeah, I do think they could have revised all this and spent a bit more time tweaking the actual in-ring gameplay. It was definitely fun to go back to this one though. I unlocked a lot of memories while playing SmackDown vs. Raw 2007 again, and hopefully you did too while watching the footage in this video. But when all these other folks are putting out videos calling this game legendary and one of the best of all time, I'm just not so sure about that. Play it yourself and then draw your own conclusions. Trust me, it's very different playing this now in comparison to playing it back in late 2006 and early 2007, but it is really important that you actually play the game again and not just check out videos on YouTube. You'll know what I mean as soon as the bell rings. Hope you enjoyed this one guys, and I won't wait so long before covering SmackDown vs. Raw 2008. That new setup I've got will make recording gameplay a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable for me, so if you like the gaming videos I put out, then you're in luck, there's more to come. Thanks for watching everyone, and please take care.